tell you a story. This happened 80 years ago, when I was around 15 years old. I went to McDonald's with my mom, and after sitting down to eat, some marketing dude approached us asking if we wanted a free meal in exchange for feedback for a new burger. It was probably one of the greatest days of my life. Now imagine that for a video game. Oh baby, welcome to Blitz. Blitz is many things. At its core, it's a card game, neatly packaged in multiple ways, ranging from great to phenomenal. Let's break it down. The card game portion, regardless of the format, always plays the same. There's a grid-like board with 8 spaces per player where cards can be played. Players take their turn one at a time, and cards are played by using mana, which increases automatically at the beginning of each turn. Minions take up 1 space on the board and automatically attack whatever's in front of them, spells don't take any space and activate their effects immediately when played. Finally, you can also equip up to 4 different passives that grant permanent bonuses, and that's the gist of it. And then, you just glance over the available collection in this very early experience and oh my god, it just gets the creative juices flowing. This didn't sound weird, I promise. You can jump back your opponent's deck with bombs that explode on their face once drawn, serenade them with demonic songs till they're dead, send your own creatures to their doom, powering even more creatures on your hand for an endless value train that keeps pumping out larger and larger dudes, artillery barrage them down with cannons, create wombo combos that end the game in a single turn once everything is assembled, and many more. Seriously, what pisses me off the most about this game is the AI. It's playing so many more archetypes I also want to try for myself, but just can't for now. I cannot wait until more cards are released. On the topic of cards, I need to point out how well designed they are. Blitz truly succeeds in walking the fine line between cards having very unique and specific effects without ever feeling like the decks build themselves, which is a trap very easy to fall into when cards become too specific and only work in one very particular way. Really, I'd say the majority of cards can fit into at least 2 different deck archetypes, of which, let me reiterate, there are a ton of. As for the different game modes, there's Story Mode and Roguelite Mode. In Story Mode, you'll select a hero and accompany them in their journey throughout 3 story arcs while progressively building your collection and handcrafting decks to defeat a set of foes. Enemies have additional challenges attached, and this was the highlight of the mode. Some of these challenges are fairly challenging, or they used to be, more on that later. And if you're a completionist like me, they force you into certain archetypes or strategies so that you experience more variety. The story mode truly shows how busted decks can be when assembled correctly, and while the game clearly takes heavy inspiration from Hearthstone, not needing to care about PvP balance just takes everything up 10 notches into truly demented territory, in the best way possible. I only wish enemies were able to keep up with the stupidity, as with proper decks it becomes nigh impossible to lose. Again, more on that later. That's the story mode. In the roguelike mode, the main difference is that you don't get to handpick your deck and rather just incrementally improve upon a basic starter one over the course of a randomly generated map with enemy encounters and special events that add unique cards to your deck or global passives to your hero. Along the way, you can also modify cards with trinkets that power every copy of that card in your deck, which is pretty important for a successful strategy. If you've ever played any other roguelike deck builders, the basic structure will feel right at home, but the experience overall will actually be quite different. Unlike other games in this genre, it's super easy to laser focus a particular strategy and go to town with it. This usually leads to truly degenerate decks by the end of a run, as you have 200 copies of a minion that attack for 10 damage a turn against enemies with 40 life at most, or 200 copies of a minion that jams your opponent's hand with poisonous traps, or 200 copies of kamikaze birds that empower the rest of your board to high heavens while providing your hero with infinite health. You're probably seeing a pattern here. Is this good or bad? I couldn't tell you honestly, but in my opinion, it feels a bit out of place, because if you want that overpowered experience, there's the story mode, where you can achieve all of that absurdity, so it ends up feeling kinda redundant. The rest of the mode is pretty fantastic though. Events are super unique and outcomes differ based on which hero you're bringing along. There's a lot of meta progression to achieve, new maps to unlock, higher scores to chase, occasional unique encounters that turn the entire combat premise on its head. It's really nice to explore everything. Now, as for downsides, you might see where this is headed, but the difficulty is a huge sore point in the experience. When I started playing, I'd rate the difficulty as pretty mild with occasional spikes in the form of particularly tricky optional objectives. Even then, by the end of the story mode, I was mowing through encounters. Assembling combos was a pain, not because enemies were challenging, but because I needed to avoid defeating them too quickly. The Roguelite Mode, on the other hand, forced you to add tons of junk cards into your deck even if you didn't want to, which is actually pretty annoying, but at least prevented decks from steamrolling everything and feeling kinda samey from run to run. Then, in one of the more recent patches, the difficulty was lowered even more. The side objectives in the story mode that were the highlights of my experience when first playing through were suddenly watered down and pretty trivial to achieve. The roguelike mode became a place where I could toy with cards not available anywhere else, but that was it. Decks also feel a bit too easy to build. I'm notoriously bad at this process, always have been and always will be. And I'm still pulling off the dumbest stuff imaginable with very little effort. Card draw is way too plentiful. Spells that break the entire enemy board are way too strong. Just picking the right combination of passives can be too much for the enemies to handle, as their decks don't scale in power nearly as quickly as yours. Honestly, if I came across the game during the current patch, I don't think the experience would have been nearly as engrossing. I hope this doesn't sound gatekeepy or whiny, and maybe the vision of the game is just not for me, which is perfectly okay. And I was luckily able to stumble upon the game when it truly resonated with me, and I mean, this is early access, so things are bound to change, right? And none of these detracts from the core experience, which is out of this world great in terms of card variety and deck experimentation. And I mean, now that I'm looking at it, honestly, I just looked at this after finishing the script, I'm clocking out at 60 hours, which according to Steam makes it easily one of my most played games of the year, so how bad can it truly be, am I right? And that's enough from me. I hope the last section wasn't too harsh, and I still think you should definitely keep an eye out for this 2-for-1 gem of an experience where you can play dancing demons and convulsing poisonous vines and booty jamming frogs. See ya!